Every other video tells you how great Sigma males are. This one doesn't, because there's a dark side to this personality type that nobody talks about. A toxic trait we all share, but refuse to acknowledge. And it's destroying our relationships, our opportunities, and sometimes our lives. Look, I'm a Sigma male. I've made all these videos celebrating the strengths, the independence, the strategic thinking. But today we're doing something different. Today we're talking about the shadow side. The trait that comes with all those strengths, but manifests as a weakness we don't want to admit we have. This isn't a hit piece. This is self-awareness. Because you can't fix what you won't acknowledge. And this trait is holding most Sigma males back from reaching their full potential. If you can handle brutal honesty about yourself, keep watching. If you can't, this probably isn't for you. The toxic trait, emotional unavailability disguised as strength. Here it is. The thing we don't want to admit. Sigma males use emotional self-sufficiency as an excuse for emotional unavailability. We've turned a healthy trait, not needing external validation, into an unhealthy pattern of refusing genuine vulnerability. We call it independence. We call it self-sufficiency. We call it not needing anyone. But here's the brutal truth. It's often just fear of intimacy with better marketing. Let me be specific about what this looks like. We pride ourselves on not needing emotional support. But that's not the same as being emotionally healthy. Sometimes, not asking for support when you need it isn't strength, it's stubbornness. Sometimes, not sharing your struggles isn't independence, it's isolation. We've confused emotional self-reliance with emotional shutdown. We've mistaken guardedness for strength. We've turned healthy boundaries into impenetrable walls. And we justify it all by saying we're just built different or don't need what others need. But that's bullshit. And deep down, we know it. Let me walk you through how this toxic trait destroys relationships. Because I've done this myself, and I've watched other Sigma males do it repeatedly. You meet someone, things are good, connection forms. Then she wants to go deeper. She wants to know you beyond the surface. She wants emotional intimacy, not just intellectual connection. And you shut down. Not obviously, not dramatically, you just don't go there. You deflect with humor. You redirect to intellectual topics. You share information, but not feelings. You maintain the wall. She can feel the wall. She knows you're holding back. And she tries harder to connect, which makes you retreat further, which makes her try harder, which makes you retreat more. Eventually, she gives up, calls you emotionally unavailable, says she can't connect with you, leaves because she needs someone who can actually be present emotionally. And we tell ourselves, she just couldn't handle my independence. She needed too much. She was too needy. But that's not what happened. What happened is we refused to show up emotionally in a relationship that required emotional presence. We used our independence as an excuse to avoid intimacy. I've done this in every serious relationship I've had. Built walls I called boundaries. Kept distance I called independence. Refused vulnerability I called strength. And every time, the relationship died because I wouldn't let anyone actually know me. Not because they were needy or couldn't handle my independence, but because I was too scared to be genuinely seen. That's the toxic trait. We're terrified of genuine emotional intimacy, so we dress up our fear as strength. This trait doesn't just destroy romantic relationships. It limits professional growth too. Networking? We tell ourselves we don't need it because we're competent enough to succeed alone. But networking isn't just about need. It's about leverage and opportunity. Mentorship? We reject it because accepting guidance feels like admitting weakness. But everyone, even geniuses, benefits from experienced perspective. Collaboration? We avoid it because we work better alone. But some achievements are literally impossible without team effort. Asking for help? Absolutely not. We'll struggle for months to figure something out ourselves rather than ask someone who could explain it in 5 minutes. This isn't independence. This is self-sabotage disguised as strength. I spent years refusing to network, rejecting mentorship, avoiding collaboration, and never asking for help. I told myself I was being independent and self-reliant, but I was actually limiting my growth to whatever I could achieve in isolation, which is significantly less than what I could have achieved with strategic connection and collaboration. My strength was keeping me weak. My independence was keeping me isolated and limited. That's the professional cost of this toxic trait. We cap our own potential by refusing the connections and support that could amplify our capabilities. Let me explain why we do this, because understanding the psychology helps us address it. Most Sigma males develop this trait as a defense mechanism. Maybe you grew up in an environment where vulnerability was punished. Maybe you trusted people who betrayed that trust. Maybe you learned early that relying on others led to disappointment. So you adapted. You learned to be self-sufficient. You learned to meet your own needs. You learned to build walls that protected you. And those walls worked. They kept you safe. They prevented further hurt. But here's what we don't want to admit. Those walls that protected us as survival mechanisms are now prisons that limit us as grown men. The defense mechanisms that helped us survive difficult circumstances are now preventing us from thriving in better ones. We're still operating from childhood wounds while pretending we're operating from mature strength. I had to face this in therapy. Had to admit that my independence was actually just unhealed trauma from a childhood where vulnerability was unsafe. My emotional self-sufficiency was really just emotional shutdown that I'd learned as a kid and never unlearned as an adult. That was humbling and painful because I'd built my entire identity around this trait I thought was strength, and I had to admit it was actually just fear with better branding. The most insidious aspect of this toxic trait is how it prevents personal growth. Growth requires vulnerability. You have to admit what you don't know. You have to accept feedback. You have to try things you might fail at. You have to let people see you struggle. But Sigma males hate all of that. We want to appear competent, self-sufficient, and in control at all times. So we avoid situations where we might look incompetent. We reject feedback because it threatens our self-image. We stick to things we're already good at instead of trying new things where we'd be beginners. This keeps us stagnant. We might be excellent in our narrow domains, but we're not growing beyond them because growth requires the vulnerability we refuse to show. I stayed in my comfort zone for years because stepping outside, it meant admitting I didn't know something or needed to learn from others. My ego, dressed up as independence, kept me from expanding my capabilities. Only when I accepted that growth requires temporary incompetence and vulnerability did I start actually developing new skills and entering new domains. But that required admitting that my emotional unavailability was holding me back, not protecting me. Here's something Sigma males almost never acknowledge. We're lonely. Not constantly, not obviously, but deeply. We pride ourselves on being comfortable alone. And we are, most of the time. But there are moments when the isolation we've created around ourselves feels less like strength and more like prison. We won't admit this, because admitting loneliness contradicts our entire identity. We're supposed to be the ones who don't need people, who are complete on our own, who prefer solitude to company. But humans are social creatures, all of us, even Sigma males. And pretending we're above that need doesn't eliminate it. It just drives it underground, where it manifests as dissatisfaction we can't explain or acknowledge. I spent years telling myself I was perfectly content alone, that I didn't need close friendships or intimate relationships, that my independence made me immune to loneliness. But late at night, after another day of productive isolation, I'd feel something I couldn't name. A hollowness, an awareness that I was building an impressive life that nobody actually knew about or shared. That wasn't contentment. That was loneliness that I refused to acknowledge, because acknowledging it would mean admitting I needed something from others. And Sigma males don't need anything from anyone, right? Except we do. We're just too proud to admit it. Here's the tricky part. This toxic trait comes from the same source as our greatest strengths. Our ability to be alone comes from the same place as our loneliness. Our emotional self-sufficiency comes from the same place as our emotional unavailability. Our independence comes from the same place as our isolation. You can't have the strengths without the shadow side. They are two sides of the same coin. The question isn't how to eliminate this trait, it's how to acknowledge it, manage it, and prevent it from sabotaging our lives while maintaining the strengths it's connected to. That requires nuance. It requires admitting that we can be both strong and flawed, both independent and in need of connection, both self-sufficient and occasionally requiring support. Most Sigma males can't hold that nuance. We want to be either fully strong or fully weak, and we choose to see ourselves as fully strong while denying the weakness that comes with it. But maturity means accepting that you're both, that your greatest strength contains the seed of your greatest weakness. So how do we fix this? Because acknowledging the problem without offering solutions is just complaining. First, recognize that vulnerability is not weakness. Sharing your struggles with someone trustworthy doesn't make you less strong. It makes you human. And being human while being strong is more impressive than pretending to be invulnerable. Second, distinguish between healthy boundaries and defensive walls. Boundaries protect you while still allowing connection. Walls prevent all connection to avoid the risk of pain. Learn the difference. Third, practice strategic vulnerability. You don't have to share everything with everyone, but you should be capable of genuine emotional intimacy with a select few people. Start small. Share something real with someone safe. Build the muscle of vulnerability. Fourth, accept that needing support sometimes doesn't negate your independence. Independent people can still ask for help when it's strategic. Self-sufficient people can still benefit from others' expertise. Strong people can still need emotional connection. Fifth, get professional help if needed. If your emotional unavailability stems from trauma or deep-seated patterns, therapy can help you unpack and heal those patterns. There's no shame in that. Sixth, evaluate your relationships honestly. Are you maintaining distance because you're genuinely incompatible or because you're scared of real intimacy? Be honest about when independence is serving you and when it's limiting you. Look, acknowledging this toxic trait doesn't diminish the Sigma male strengths. Independence is still valuable. Emotional self-sufficiency is still important. Healthy boundaries are still necessary, but taken to the extreme, these strengths become weaknesses. And most Sigma males are operating at the extreme without realizing it. We're so committed to our identity as independent, self-sufficient, emotionally strong men that we can't admit when our independence becomes isolation, our self-sufficiency becomes refusal of legitimate support, and our emotional strength becomes emotional shutdown. This admission isn't weakness, it's maturity. It's the recognition that no personality type is perfect, and even our greatest strengths have shadow sides that need to be acknowledged and managed. The strongest thing a Sigma male can do is admit that his strength has limits and costs, that his independence sometimes looks like isolation, that his emotional self-sufficiency sometimes manifests as emotional unavailability. That takes more courage than maintaining the facade of invulnerability. I made this video because I've lived this pattern and I've seen countless other Sigma males live it too. And it's holding us back from deeper relationships, greater professional success, and authentic personal growth. We're not broken, we're not weak, but we do have a toxic trait that we need to acknowledge and address. Your independence is real, your strength is real, your self-sufficiency is real, but so is your emotional unavailability. So is your isolation. So is your refusal of legitimate vulnerability. You can be both independent and connected, both strong and vulnerable, both self-sufficient and open to support. That's not contradiction, that's maturity. If you recognized yourself in this video and you're willing to admit that emotional unavailability might be something you need to work on, drop a comment with the word awareness and tell me which part hit closest to home. And if this video gave you permission to acknowledge a weakness without feeling like less of a Sigma male, hit that like button and subscribe. Because strength isn't about being perfect, it's about being honest about your imperfections and working on them. Remember, you can be strong and still have areas to improve. Acknowledging your toxic traits doesn't make you weak, it makes you self-aware. And self-awareness is the foundation of actual growth. Until next time, stay honest with yourself.